Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and we are here this week to talk about G.I. Joe, a real American hero, issue number 144. That's right, it's another Joe and Joe Illustrated as we close in towards that elusive 155. This is at the countdown. This is 12 episodes left to go. When we're done with this today, we'll only have 11 in front of us. It's very exciting. Along those lines, I want to say a couple things. First of all, I want to say thank you to all of you listeners, new and old. If you're new to the show, been around for a while, and this is the podcast where we cover kind of everything, like all the media for it. Like we've done all of the cartoons. I'm working my way through all of the comic books. If we do end up doing all of the comic books, I will be old by the time we finish it. But we are working through a real American hero right now, and we go page by page, panel by panel, with excruciating at times detail, and we like to discuss and celebrate each comic book issue because I used to say this, I think, on the show. Not every book is a Dark Knight, but every book has some gems of brilliance in it, and every book, you could work on when you're putting a comic book together, you could work on it for the exact same amount of time. Everyone puts in, they say roughly back in the day the reason they were monthly is it'd take you about a month to produce a comic book. And sometimes those books are great, and sometimes those books are considered not so great. But in all of them, the human labor, the blood, sweat, and tears that went into them, there was a lot of thought put into every page and every panel that you're looking at. So that is what we try to bring out in this show. Some episodes more than others. Some we end up being just a quick little run through of this, what happens. But a lot of times what I like to think is we find some gem moments in the pages of some of these, non-special issues. But I got to tell you, this is a special issue. This is G.I. Joe 144, starring Snake Eyes, of course, as the title card says. And this is one of the missing pieces to Snake Eyes' origin story. The cover is him and his olive drabs holding Scarlet and her olive drabs in front of a smoldering helicopter. And it tells the story of how his face got so disfigured and damaged, which we've been told before, and we've been privy to kind of the rough details, but this is the actual story. This is the actual in-depth adventure of how that happened. So this was huge. This was really big. I remember reading this, being very excited as a big Snake Eyes guy. This is kind of the missing piece when you think about what the pillars of Snake Eyes, and this goes back to our conversation about the Snake Eyes movie and how and if anyone listening is part of the creative team on the Snake Eyes movies, take note. I don't mean offense, but this is what you messed up. There's a few pillars to Snake Eyes that makes him, I think, in my opinion, makes him what we love about him. The costume is I think first and foremost in all its shapes and forms, and some are better than others, but it's still the costume. It's also the ninja, and a big part of it is the disfigurement and his inability to show his face, his inability to communicate verbally. That's one of the pillars of Snake Eyes. And we've never really explored that, so that's what we're getting in this issue. So it's really, really awesome. There's no deep mystery to it. There's certainly ties to other stories and some history behind it and all that, but there's no mystery, right? We're not digging into some Arishikage secret where there's Zartan lurking in the background. It's pretty straightforward, and I appreciate that. I like that a lot. So, so I'm excited to get into this. And before we do get into it, I want to do a couple bits of business. First of all, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, the Movies and a Meal podcast.
Listeners, I know what you need in your life. You need more podcasts. And you also love movies. So why not do a podcast that's about not one movie, it's about not two movies, it's about 3 movies and a meal. I'm talking the Movies and a Meal podcast. This show is great. It's brought to you by Keith, Brad, and Ben, and each week they bring a new movie to the table, which they all discuss as a group. And it's not, your highfalutin movies. It's What We Do in the Shadows, The Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Out of Sight. It's Bad Education, Ghost Rider, and A View to a Kill. It's X-Men Last Stand, Queen Sugar, The Mandalorian, and Major League 2. They are a lot of fun to listen to. You guys know Ben. It's our friend Ben Pensarga. He was a guest on Joe and Joe. In fact, Ben was the very first remote guest that I ever had on this podcast, so he's always got a special place in my heart. I'm really digging this. I just started listening to it last week. It is a lot of fun. They bring a guest in. The guest, I listened to their Heathers episode. They were joined by Kelly, and she went in depth on her favorite movie, which was Heathers, and it made me want to go watch Heathers to watch with them. I really dig it. So guys, find them out there at Movies and a Meal, Twitter, Instagram. Their website is moviesandameal.podbean.com. They put out one episode a week. Give them a listen, guys. Support them. Let them know Joe on Joe sent you. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. It is quite entertaining. And now back to the show.
And while you are subscribing to the Movies and a Meal podcast, I want you to rate and review them. I want you to rate and review me on your podcatcher. I want you to give me a follow on Facebook. I want you to give me a give. I want you to say hello on Instagram. I want you to add Joe on Joe Pod. It's also on Twitter if you're on those social networks. If you're not, that's cool too. But I do think that everyone has access to Gmail, and this is why it's important. So joeonjoepod@gmail.com. That is my email address. And I've said it every show. A lot of people, I got a lot of people reach out. It's great. And I do hear from them. And I love communicating with the listeners. But the reason that's important today is because this is the official announcement. I teased this on Twitter, but not everyone's on Twitter. The next step, the next phase of Joe on Joe is going to be called You on Joe. And what it's going to be, it's going to sound similar, but it's going to be a little different. It is going to be your favorite aspect of G.I. Joe, the singular thing that you love the most about G.I. Joe. Now, it could be, you could say the cartoon, and this is in, as we're prepping each episode. Then I'll say, well, what episode? You need to find me one favorite episode. And then we're going to dig deep into that singular episode. Or you could say, I love Shipwreck. And you know what? We're going to do as deep a dive on Shipwreck as we possibly can for that episode. You could say, I love the Kung Fu Battle Grip about G.I. Joe. And then we're going to talk about the Kung Fu Battle Grip and everything that I could find out and dig up about Kung Fu Battle Grip. We're going to talk about it. You could say, I love the peg holders that they stand on. Then that's it. That's what that episode is going to be about exclusively. It is going to be about you on Joe. And I'm saying, all of you listeners, I want Joe fans. One thing about this show that I've loved and really, really actually prided on is a lot of my guests and a lot of my listeners and fans and friends, and they're not exactly the super Joe centric. So this has become a journey for me to actually introduce G.I. Joe to a lot of people in my life, and a lot of people that know me but don't necessarily know anything about G.I. Joe. And to a man and a woman, as they've had them on guests on the show, we flipped off the mics and they've turned to me and said, that was a lot of fun. Like, that episode was totally crazy. And there's a genuine joy there. So really quickly, I learned that introducing people to what I love about G.I. Joe is really, really rewarding. So I want to give you that opportunity. So now it's kind of going to flip it, right? So now all of our guests I want to be Joe fans and fans of the show. And if you want to participate, just send me an email. I have a spreadsheet with everyone's contact information, and we're going to be organizing it and so on and so forth. And listen, sometimes the episodes might end up being 15 minutes. I got to tell you, if someone's like, I really love the peg stands that the holder stands, I don't know how long we'll be able to talk about that, but we're going to do as deep a dive as possible. And that might be it. It could be a 15-minute episode. Or in the example, someone's like, I love Shipwreck. Well, we could talk a lot about Shipwreck. That could be an hour and a half. I don't know. I have no idea. But it's going to be very specific to what you bring to the table. And you know what? If people stop calling and stop saying, I don't want to be a part of the show, then maybe we'll take a week off. I don't know. It's going to be a different project. But it's going to be driven by you listeners. So if you, and you know what? It's open to everybody. So if you've got your own podcast, if you've got your own YouTube channel, you guys do your own, because I know a lot of you guys are friends and you guys run your own shows. Let's do it. Let's cross-pollinate. Let's do it more. Let's get you on here. And it's You on Joe. So the show will still called Joe on Joe for, marketing purposes. But it's instead of Joe and Joe Illustrated, and we've done Joe and Joe Theater, and we've done, just standard Joe on Joe. Joe and Joe All-Stars, we've had a few episodes of that. This is now going to be the You on Joe phase. So send me an email to joeonjoepod@gmail.com. Send me that email if you are at all interested in being a guest on the show. And I have a lot of you, but if you've also reached out in the past, I'm like, I really want to do on the show, because remember, I haven't actually done interviews for real since before the pandemic. So there's a lot of people that are awesome and we're like, I want to be on your show, but then the Joe and Joe Illustrated format does not lend itself to having a guest. It doesn't. We, pardon me for blanking on his name, but we had a wonderful guest recently, last year, and we did an episode of Illustrated, and I loved having him on, but it's hard to do. It's hard to do what we do with the comic book with a guest. It was a very long episode. So but that reignited in me. I want to do more interviews. So that's what we're doing. We're kind of going the other direction. So yeah, this is going to be different show. And this will be after we finish 155. So we've got about 11 weeks to get everything prepared and start getting some episodes in the bank. So, reach out. Let me know if you're interested. I really, really, really mean it, guys. Let's have a lot of fun. All you got, everyone is Zoom now. Now that we've been in the COVID pandemic, there is no excuse. Everyone has Zoom. It is so easy to reach out and be a guest. It's so much fun. We'll have fun. If you have something to promote, if you don't have something to promote, it doesn't matter. If there's something about G.I. Joe that you really, really love, get specific. And I'm going to work with you to get as specific as possible, because, the more the merrier. Like if you say Snake Eyes, I'll probably say, okay, well, which version of Snake Eyes, right? Or what era of Snake Eyes? Do you like animated Snake Eyes? Okay, great. Do you like for V1 Snake Eyes? Okay, great. We're going to talk about him. So some characters lend themselves to being bigger, right? But then, if you're like, I like Big Lob. Well, it's probably one episode out of Big Lob. And he's great. I love Big Lob. But we'll talk the heck out of Big Lob. So that's what we're talking about. You guys get the gist. So send me an email, joeandjoepod@gmail.com. And we're going to have a lot of fun. So, yeah. With that,
You were saying?
we're going to jump into our segment where we look at comic books and movies that were on the stands the same month as the issue in question. So this month is it's G.I. Joe 144. It's cover dated January of 1994. And so that was actually on the stands in November of 1993. So we're going to throw a wrinkle in it, and we're going to start with the movies. What movies were in the theaters in November of 1993? And it starts with actually, it's some rough movies. Okay. All right, listen. The third entry in a series is usually rough. I love Return of the Jedi. A lot of people say that's the worst of the original trilogy. Godfather 3 is certainly forgettable. Superman 3, forget about it. Batman Forever was part 3? We all know the issues there, right? So on November 5th, 1993, we had both RoboCop 3 and Look Who's Talking Now, that's the third Look Who's Talking movie. Both difficult films, both featuring all-star casts. Look Who's Talking, Travolta, Kirstie Alley, Danny DeVito, Diane Keaton, Charles Barkley, Olympia Dukakis, George Segal. And now the kid is no longer Bruce Willis, right? And is the girl still, is the dogs are talking in this? Yeah, see, yeah. I don't even know if I've ever actually, I know I've seen this, but it's been a long time, so I don't really remember. I can't speak with any clarity, but it's Look Who's Talking 3. Also RoboCop 3. I love me RoboCop. I won't speak ill of RoboCop 1 and 2 because they're amazing and they're great. Even 2 is, for all its faults, is great. RoboCop 3, directed by Fred Decker, who's awesome, especially genre filmmakers. Does stuff like the Monster Squad. Peter Weller left the franchise, and he actually left to do, was it Naked Lunch? Is that the one he did? Yeah, I think that was it. He left RoboCop. He opted out of RoboCop 3 to do that. He told me that when I met him at Golden Apple, and he's awesome. I love Peter Weller. So he was replaced by Robert John Burke, who's still acting and still working actor today. And I got to be honest, he does a fine job as RoboCop. He's not a terrible RoboCop. Nancy Allen comes back only to be killed off. Rip Torn is in this. CCH Pounder shows up. I love CCH Pounder. If you guys know who CCH Pounder is. She played vocally. She did Amanda Waller on the Justice League stuff, but she's been in a ton of stuff. The Shield. She was the chief, I believe, in the Shield, if memory serves. That might have been her most high-profile role, but she's great. She's got that voice. Talks like this. Who else? Oh, there's a couple. Oh, Bradley Whitford shows up, right, and Stephen Root show up in this movie. The greatest part about this is the box for this says, or the box, I say this because I first saw this renting it on VHS when I was living in Chicago. They used to have bad, like, cheap movies for $1. And it was, the tagline was RoboCop goes up against lethally efficient android ninjas. And if that's not a sell for me, lethally efficient android ninjas, then I don't know what is. November 10th is Carlito's Way, which Brian De Palma, it's kind of a second bite at that Scarface apple. It's good. It's a good movie. It's Al Pacino, Sean Penn. I mean, it's good. I'm not here to knock on Carlito's Way, but it always just felt like just another bite out of Scarface and a lesser Scarface to me. So that's never been a favorite, but I know that there are huge Carlito's Way fans, and I know that it's a great flick. But that was in the movie theater on November 10th. November 12th, just 2 days later, Carlito's Way had only 2 days to make money before this movie swooped in and stole it all. Ernest Rides Again. Also, a little movie called The Piano, which won a ton of awards. And the Three Musketeers, and this is the adaptation with Charlie Sheen, Kiefer Sutherland, Chris O'Donnell, Oliver Platt. So this is where they're trying to Young Guns-ify the Three Musketeers. On November 19th, Addams Family Values came out, which is the sequel to Addams Family, which is very underrated. And Addams Family Values might be even more underrated. This is Toilet Teal, my wife, Rebecca. You guys know her as Toilet Teal. This is, I think she says, like, her favorite holiday movie of all time. Something about the turkey song, the turkey thing at the camp that they sing. She adores this film, and I know a lot of people feel this way about this movie. I think it's a lot of fun. So Addams Family Values and I'm going to throw this out there. A couple of years ago, there was an Addams Family animated movie, which they did a sequel to. I don't know that I've seen the sequel, but we watched the original, the first animated one from, like, I don't know, 3 years ago. We saw it in theaters. It was really good. It was really, really charming. And I don't think it got enough attention. It was so well done, and we really enjoyed it. And I'm not massive Addams Family fans. I was more of a Munster guy growing up. But that recent animated movie is pretty good. Speaking of Munsters, I can't remember if I mentioned this on the show. I watched it a couple weeks ago when I was traveling before I got COVID, which I'm feeling much better. Thank you very much. I appreciate kind words. A lot of you guys reached out. I appreciate it so much. Feeling much better. Coming out of quarantine now. But that Munsters movie, it felt like it was 3 episodes of what was supposed to be a TV series that they then stitched together to make a movie that was not great. That's all. Between that and then this last Halloween, I've been just a little disappointed in Horrorland. But there's still a ton of great horror stuff out there. So you guys got a couple weeks left of Halloween where you can watch I love watching horror year round. I have a subscription to Shudder. I think there's really great stuff in the genre. So I'm not at all ashamed about watching a lot of horror movies. But this is that time of year where your wife or loved one or spouse or partner can't give you any guff for watching all the slasher stuff because you're like, I'm in the mood. It's Halloween. Blah, blah, blah. So take advantage of it, guys. Do not sleep on that. I don't know everyone's situation with, but my wife will look askance at me sometimes, and I'm like, she's like, it's 8 a.m. Why are you watching a slasher? I'm like, because I started it last night and fell asleep. But in October, everyone's got the pass, so watch as much horror movies as you can this month. On November 24th, Mrs. Doubtfire came out. We all know Mrs. Doubtfire, Rob Williams. That's a pretty charming movie. It's I remember it. It was a big hit, and then people loved to hate on it because it was cheesy. But then I think people have come around to it and realized how wonderful Robin Williams' performance in Mrs. Doubtfire really is, because he's really brilliant in it. So I think Miss Doubtfire ends up in the positive category, even though for years it was in the joke category. But I want to talk about the movie A Perfect World, directed by Clint Eastwood, with starring Kevin Costner, and I think the little kid is this T.J. Lowther. I don't remember, but man, that's the kid. I love this movie. I think this movie is really overlooked. It is just a wonderful, sad, well-made movie. I watched this a lot in college. I thought it was just really well made. Costner's so good in it. He's a bad guy on the run, and he takes a kid hostage, but then they befriend each other. And Clint Eastwood's the cop that's kind of chasing him, but he's barely in it. It's really Kevin Costner's movie, and it's great. Perfect World is really, it's been a long number of years since I've revisited that, but I watched that a lot when it came out. It's really, really just a not feel good movie at all. It's a well made, I really enjoy Perfect World. So that
You were saying?
were the movies that were on the stands when G.I. Joe 144 came out. So now let's take a look at we'll look at Marvel Comics. And we will if my browser responds. So we're going to look at Marvel Comics, and these are the books that were on the stands that month. Avengers West Coast 102. It's funny. I think for the last 2-3 weeks in a row, I kept thinking that it was the final issue. Like when 100 hit, I was like, oh, it's the final issue. Oh, no, wait, it's one more. And then 101 came out. It's the final issue. And our brain went, no, wait, it's 102. It's a weird number. Avengers West Coast 102 is the final issue of Avengers. Now, they would move over, be resurrected in the book Force Works, which probably is going to come out next month, I imagine. I don't see it in this month. But which was a Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning joint and was terribly 90s. But Abnett and Lanning are super talented. So there's really good stuff in Force Works, except it's wrapped up in the angst and over musculature era of the 90s, right? So it's easily overlooked because it probably ultimately should be. However, it's written by two dudes who were really, really good and know what they're doing. So it kind of, and I think the artist on Force Works is actually someone who went on to be really good. It just was in that style at the time. Anyway, we're not talking about Force Works here. We're talking about Avengers West Coast 102, and it's Captain America shows up and he tells the team, you guys are disbanded. You guys are a bunch of chuckleheads. And the captain, or he's a U.S. agent at this point, he's ready to go with Steve Rogers. So that's what's happening on the cover there. Daredevil Man Without Fear miniseries continues. They're on issue number 4. Again, if you've never read it, read it. If you like Daredevil, read it. If you like seeing Daredevil on She-Hulk and you've never read it, read this. It is a masterclass of a year one kind of story from the master of year one stories, Frank Miller. Really, really good. What else we got? Of course, there's G.I. Joe 144. Gambit's on the second issue of his miniseries. There's a crossover that's happening in the Darkhold Spirits of Vengeance books, and they all have these blood stains on them. So Darkhold 16, as well as Doctor Strange 61. Ghost Rider 45, and then Ghost Rider Blaze Spirits of Vengeance 18. They all have this blood drip overlay, and it's part of I think it's the Midnight Suns crossover. If I could, well, they've got the Indicia. I don't know if that's the name of the crossover actually, because they were just part of the Midnight Suns imprint at the time. But there's a big crossover happening. So if you're a big Ghost Rider fan, you probably remember this time. Incredible Hulk is in space with the Pantheon. As much as I love Peter David's run on the Hulk, you can keep the Pantheon. I was never a big fan of the Pantheon. That was like a modern. I mean, they named themselves after, like Achilles and stuff like that, like heroes of myth, and it was kind of like setting up a modern day Olympus, right? That was the whole idea of it. Like that's not great insight. Literally, they named themselves that, and that's what he was trying to play with, of like having Hulk hang out with like gods, and it never really worked for me. I really never cared for those characters. He revisited them recently. He brings them back every once in a while, and God bless him for doing it. I think Peter David's a super talented writer. I really enjoy his stuff, but these characters never really worked for me. He brought him back in the Maestro series recently too, or one of them, and I think that guy got killed off, and I was happy to see that. Let's put it that way. I've never been a big fan of the Pantheon, but there they are. And my computer is being uncooperative. Something is updating. All right. I'm back after, on my end, an extended 20-minute recess for rebooting the computer. I'm going to throw this out there. I used Comic Base as as an archive for my large comic book collection. And they just put out a massive new update. And as usual with their massive updates, there's a lot of bugs. And in this case, I was running into the background, and it locked up the entire system. So if you're listening Comic Base, which I doubt you are, get back to work and fix this, because I like your software, but every time you do a major update, it tends to bork. So we're finishing with Marvel. Disney's The Three Musketeers. Marvel did an adaptation of that movie we talked about earlier. That's fun. I love me some movie adaptation comics. I've said it before. I'll say it again. We've got a new Nova series. This is kind of key, because I know while Marvel already introduced the Nova Corps, they're going to be doing a Nova. This is Nova's second series. The first series was, The Man Called Nova. This is just straight up Nova #1. So that came out. We also had Iron Man 300 came out this month, as well as Marvel's #1. This is the massive Kurt Busiek, Alex Ross Marvel's series, where it retold the history of the Marvel Universe up through I think the last issue stopped with X-Men, the Attack of the Sentinels, I think. So, or did it go all the way to Jean Grey? Because I remember seeing the Jean Grey getting attacked at I forget. It's been a while since I've read it, but you guys know what I'm talking about. The Sentinel attack in New York for right before Jean Grey became Phoenix. That stuff. That's what I'm thinking of. I think it went that far, but maybe I'm thinking that's a post thing that Alex Ross did as an addendum. But it's the story of Phil Sheldon, the photographer. It's wonderful. If you've never read Marvels, again, that's another book that you really should seek out, because it's really, really quite good. And deserves every accolade that it has, and it's certainly won a lot of accolades over the years. Yeah, so I think that's it. I think we've spent enough time on Marvel.
You were saying?
And over at DC Comics, Batman, Judge Dredd, Vendetta, and Gotham. This book's cool. Anytime Batman and Judge Dredd have a crossover, it's worth reading. They're two extreme creatures who, on one hand, you might think they'd have a lot in common, but then when you dig a little deeper under the surface, you realize, oh no, Batman would hate everything that Judge Dredd is all about, and so on and so forth. So that's cool. If you've never read the Batman Judge Dredd crossovers, I think they did 3 of them at least, if not 4. They're really, really good. Also this month is The Mask of the Phantasm, the animated movie adaptation, was on the shelves. That's really cool. Of course, that's a classic. That's when people say, what's their favorite Batman movie? A lot of people respond with Mask of the Phantasm. A lot of people really do, and I think they might be right. It's maybe the most pure like Batman movie without any reservations about who he is, including all aspects of who he is, Robin and the Bat family and all the vehicles and anyway. Green Lantern 48. This is the start of that 3-issue downfall arc for Hal Jordan, where Emerald Twilight kind of stuff. So this is the start. Hal's got the broken arm. He's very upset Coast City is destroyed. He tries to recreate Coast City with his ring, and he's just not powerful enough. Therefore, it leads him off to seek to get more power in order to bring back the dead, which is never a good journey for a hero. Just take note, kids. It's never... Part of the heroes is that they need to accept the realities of it. Superman 85. I don't recall. So it's called Cat Grant's Revenge. So this might be part 2 of it. Cat Grant. This was a dark story. Cat Grant was a gossip reporter for the Daily Planet, and she was always very bubbly and light. And at some point, right, Shirley, you know what I'm talking about. At some point, they introduced that she had a kid. Or early on, they introduced that she had a kid and she was divorced. In this story, the kid gets kidnapped by the Toyman and I believe molested. And she don't like it. And she's got a gun on the cover, and I believe, if I recall, she gets her revenge. They then retconned that he was actually alive, that it was a toy or whatever, or it wasn't actually him that did it, because the powers that be were like, oh no, we really did ruin a classic Superman villain. Like they went real dark with it, and you just ruined one of the more fun, lighthearted, silly Superman villains in this. And so this is the start. This is the story that did it. So yeah, it's dark. It's as responsibly told as you could in these pages, but it's a dark story. It's just a reason it's not like celebrated. They don't collect it. The Cat Grant's Revenge trade paperback. That's not on the stands anytime soon. Because it's dark. So there you go.
Now, mass is ready.
All right, G.I. Joe 144, starring Snake Eyes. Let's get into it. Cool cover, Will Rosado. I like Will Rosado's pencils. I like him inside. I think this is like his stepping stones. I've talked about this before. I fell in love with him on his work on Green Arrow, and this is definitely a stepping stone to get there. You could see him. You could see some of the stuff that I really enjoyed about his Green Arrow stuff. Him kind of finding it. It's a very thin line throughout, but it's a smooth line. He has a smooth line throughout this entire issue. And the cover, I think, is also similar. Like there's not a lot, there's not a lot of hatching. There's not a lot of jagged edges, lots of continuous lines on these forms if you look closely at it, right? So lots of, which just makes a smoother image. Unfortunately, he is saddled with that version of Snake Eyes that looks like a serial killer. Not a fan. I know. Again, this is what you on Joe's going to be all about. Some of you guys are going to be like, I love Snake Eyes. Was that V4? I think I love Snake Eyes V4, and we're going to talk about it, and we'll get into it. And if that's your version of Snake Eyes, that's it. That's what we're going to talk about. But it's not for me. So when you draw him on the cover here as a like a wispy shadow in the background, it doesn't look like Snake Eyes to me. It looks like a serial killer staring at the wreckage of a helicopter. I don't need to see Snake Eyes' eyes. I just don't. I think that's ultimately what bothers me about that mask. It's too smooth, and I know what I'm looking at here is it's a monochrome, smoky version of it, but it applies to how he's drawn inside too. It's too smooth, it's too uniform, and I don't need to see his eyes. I just don't. It throws me off. Snake Eyes we should never be seeing his eyes. But having said that, it's a good cover. I think there's a rough, what do they call this? awkward. Is it? There's a term, and I've said this before in the show, and I forgot the term, and then I look it up, and then I forget it again. It's like an awkward. Basically, it's his feet are literally sitting on the bottom of the cover, and that's usually a no-no because it just looks weird. Usually, you want either the cover to cut him. In this case, because he's holding either the cover would cut him off, like maybe at the ankles, like you don't draw his actual feet, so the camera zoomed in, or the camera zoomed back a little bit, and you see more of the ground, and there's more space between his feet and the actual bottom of the cover. Who knows? Maybe they drew it and then they zoomed in to make it to just take advantage of the size of the picture, and then that's what you end up with. But his feet, he's standing on the bottom of the cover, and that's usually a no-no, at least for me, and the way I was always taught. But yeah, it's clear it's a wreckage of a helicopter. You see the rotor blades, you see fire, you see a guy whose face is blowed up, and it's Scarlett who's unconscious. It's a fun cover. I mean, not fun. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't want to be anyone involved here.
Yo, Joe!
Snake Eyes, The Tale Untold. That's a cool way to title this. I like that. And it's script by Larry Hama, pencils William Rosado, inks Chip Wallace. Chip Wallace also did the inks on the cover, by the way. Coloring Bob Sharon, lettering Vicky Williams. Welcome aboard, Vicky. Editor Mike Lackey and editor-in-chief Tom DeFalco. It opens on a Tomahawk with Wild Bill at the helm. Coming into a hot LZ. The red smoke was popped, and we're picking up immediately after the events of 142. So remember 143 was that weird old villain. I had a thought on that, actually. After I recorded the last episode, I was thinking a lot about Tom Mandrake's artwork for that. And so I have we could reach out to Tom Mandrake and find out. I'm sure maybe I will. But in the meantime, his artwork was it didn't seem to me at least, it didn't feel like Tom Mandrake's art at the time, which he was doing Spectre, right? Which was a little more loosey, a little more like Carmine Infantino-y Flash kind of, loosey-goosey, right? Or Gene Colan inspired, right? Like an Infantino meets Colan is how I would describe that Spectre era Tom Mandrake, and kind of his own work, of course. I think he's very talented, but that was that kind of like ephemeral, loosey style. It's how his work looked on Martian Manhunter, which would be a few years later. It's definitely how Spectre stuff worked, and this G.I. Joe book looked real. Old school Tom Mandrake, right? It was really tight. Now that could have been just him doing it, but it got me thinking. I wonder if that's actually an older fill-in that was in the drawer for a long time, that they actually were sitting on for a while. That really got me thinking about that. Just entirely because his art style didn't seem to mesh with what he was doing at the time, which was the Spectre. So, yeah, I'm actually real curious about that. Plus, he would have been working on Spectre, which is a DC property, and he'd be then with DC for a good long time. And even then, there wasn't a lot of artistic crossover. So I really wonder if, and maybe I'll try to I'm talking myself into sleuthing this out. Try to find out when that story was actually commissioned and drawn. Because I wouldn't, because Cobra wasn't in it too, right? Remember, Cobra's not in that story. So I wouldn't be surprised if that story really was commissioned a long time earlier and sat in the drawer forever. So the plot thickens. And maybe, maybe everyone listening knows the answer to that. Maybe I'm dumb. I've never really looked it up. This was all in my head and I was thinking about it. And those are the things that made sense to me. So may or may not be true. However, I tell you what is true. This Will Rosado drawing of the Tomahawk is spot on. That is a good-looking, toy-etic, toy-centric, toy-accurate Tomahawk. That is someone who had the toy in front of him and drew it, and it looks real good.
Yo, Joe!
So, all the guys are getting, this is a fallout from that Transformers adventure, and they're all getting picked up. But the Tomahawk here says, Wild Bill basically says there's other choppers on the way for everyone else. This one, we're only picking up, actually Stalker says it. He says, sorry, Storm Shadow. Hawk is commandeering this aircraft for a priority mission. And they have orders to get Scarlet back to the Pentagon for a debriefing ASAP because the desk honchos are boku curious about what happened at Dr. Biggles Jones. So Snake Eyes, Rock and Roll, and Stalker are also coming along as the security details. So they're all going to leave. So it's all the old OGs, which is a cool way to get everyone involved. Isolate all the old school Joes in this helicopter to then tell the story that we're about to tell. So all the Ninja Force and Roadblock and even Spirit, they all hang out back at that the smoldering city that was Millville, and they have to wait for more helicopters.
Yo, Joe!
This is a very cool thing that they do here. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you why they do it, but I know I've seen it in enough movies that they have like red lights. I think it's so that you can to keep your night visibility, and also like so people don't see as much on the ground. There's different lighting and the interior of helicopters. In Predator, I think that happens. Anyway, I've seen enough military movies to know that happens. So they're coloring the inside of this the Tomahawk as it flies, and it's all with this red lighting, which is really cool. That's a detail that I don't think we've seen a lot in the Joe books. Really, usually they just color it normally, but they give everything in the cockpits up front. What do you call that? The body, like where the jump seats, where everyone's sitting, the main part of it. That's all got this red lighting on it, which is really cool. Because then when they cut to Wild Bill in the front, he's lit normally because he's in the cockpit and he has normal lighting on him. So I like this a lot. So basically, Snake Eyes and Scarlet are sitting together. Serial killer Snake Eyes are sitting together. I don't even like the ridge on the front of the mask makes it so obvious that it's wearing a mask. Like I wish it would just a full on helmet. That's weird. But he's sitting next to her, and it gets people thinking about Stalker's stand. I wonder if this triggers the same thoughts in his head after all these years. And someone else, whoever he's talking to, says he remembers all right. He doesn't want that door to slam shut. And in a really great bit of detail, you see Snake Eyes using one of the straps to tie the door open so that it stays open so that it doesn't slam shut again. And then we get a little bit of like, never forget, and we go into flashback town.
Yo, Joe!
So now we're in the Middle East somewhere. And we've got two Hueys hanging out. And in the language of comics, we know we're in a flashback because now the panel corners are rounded. So if you're reading along, that's it's a good sign that you're dealing with a story that's being told, or an outside narrative. In this case, in the past, someone's recollecting it, and so the literal panel frames are changing. So that's cool. And it's Rock and Roll, Grunt, Snake Eyes, Scarlet. And this page, that's all we see. And Snake Eyes is not screwed up. He's normal. They're all wearing their just regular green camos or fatigues. And Snake Eyes is keeping to himself, and his face is always turned away from camera. And even when he is in camera, they draw him in heavy shadow, so we never really get to see his face, right? And Rock and Roll is telling Grunt, who at this point is the new guy, basically Snake Eyes is a dude to be trusted. He's always got your back. And Scarlet, we see Scarlet and Snake Eyes hold hands. And I would like this doesn't waste time getting into it. And to build good dramatic tension, Larry introduces a moment of lightness, showing that Scarlet and Snake Eyes are holding hands, therefore in a relationship, and immediately follows through with a whoomp, which is
Yo, Joe!
The neighboring helicopter. Their turbine just exploded. as Rock and Roll says, they never installed the sand filters on the intakes. So now that helicopter, and we know the story, we've been told the story before, that helicopter spins off, crashes into the snake helicopter with Snake Eyes and Scarlet and Rock and Roll and Grunt. So everyone has to land, everyone has to crash. And those guys jump out of the plane, except for the door slams on with a ka-chung, Scarlet's web gear. She says, my webbing's caught and the door's jammed. Get out, Snake Eyes. Like, that's, that's an order kind of a thing. Interestingly, though, well, no, it's drawn that way. Well, the way it's drawn, let me see here. No, that's right. Okay, forget it.
Yo, Joe!
Sometimes I think I see things that I don't. So she says, and this is what's great about comic book time is that this thing's crashing in a matter of seconds, and yet she has time to say, Snake Eyes, there's no time to cut it. Both Hueys are out of control. Snake Eyes is going at her with a knife. He's gonna use his trench knife to cut her web gear off, and it seems like it's over the airwaves. It says someone saying, "Get out, get out, get out, get out, get out." The helicopters crash into each other with an explosive force, and all that jet fuel shot out of the helicopter through the window that Snake Eyes was standing in front of and into his face. Someone says he didn't shut down the fuel pumps. This is the other pilot didn't turn off the fuel pumps. Therefore, this wouldn't have happened had he done that. And it says JP4, which is jet fuel, is spraying all over the place. Get them out of there. So Snake Eyes got hit in the face, which I don't know if jet fuel melts steel beams, but it certainly does a number on Snake Eyes' face.
Yo, Joe!
So Murphy's Law in action. What a cluster F up. And if you look closely on this page, so that first panel is square cornered because that's in the now. It's got the red tint, and it's Rock and Roll remembering this story. And then we immediately go back to the rounded corners because it's his memory of it. So then we go back to full color where you see Rock and Roll and Grunt heading towards the crash to get the guys out of there. They're like, nobody could be alive in there. And Snake Eyes comes roaring out of the fire with his face just not good. His head is on fire, according to Rock and Roll, and he's carrying Scarlet.
Yo, Joe!
So they're putting the fires out. They're putting the flame out on Snake Eyes. They're taking Scarlet away. She's been knocked out cold. Hawk pulls up in his Jeep. So I would say this. What's Hawk doing there in a Jeep? That's actually weird because they were flying. They were flying over the desert, on their way, either on the way to the base for the mission or on the mission itself. And Hawk is just following them in a Jeep. Now, there's a medevac that's right behind him, which they say it's a good thing we had all of our support in place for this mission. So that is answering the question that I just asked, which is Hawk in the Jeep and the medevac in the helicopter. However, they were, trailing them for support, but I feel like the Jeep would have really been slowing them down. Like that, the helicopter I get, and it's a medical copter and Wild Bill and Doc are actually in the medical copter. Wild Bill says something like, oh no, who is it? It's I think it's Rock and Roll says, if you ask me, Wild Bill should have been driving the insertion chopper instead of the medevac. So he's blaming the pilot a little bit. Grunt stands up for the pilot. We see Wild Bill telling Doc to hurry it up because as soon as we get them on, he's going to jet and get them to safety. Of course, Wild Bill's the best. Doc's the best. And they get Scarlet on, but they're starting to Hawk tells Rock and Roll that the window of opportunity for this rescue mission that they were on, it just slammed shut. So they were on the rescue mission. And Hawk must have been driving very fast in that Jeep to keep up with him.
Yo, Joe!
And Snake Eyes hears Hawk say that, and he breaks free of Rock and Roll's hands. And in the sand, with his face melted and hair gone and all that stuff, he writes in the sand, he writes the letters C and M, which is Charlie Mike, which means continue the mission. And Doc's like, absolutely not. This man's vocal cords are damaged. He can't even communicate, for Pete's sake. He's got 3rd-degree burns and major tissue trauma to his entire head. He should be in shock. If we don't get him to a hospital now, they'll never be able to repair the damage. And Snake Eyes is just pointing at the Charlie Mike that he just wrote in the sand with his head down. And we do see the top of his just ravaged skull. It's superhuman. Now, maybe he put himself in an Urashikage trance. I don't know. But he is destroyed here.
Yo, Joe!
And what's cool about this story, expanding on this, because we've known this before, right? We've been told the story that he was in the helicopter and it blew up and it blew his face out and blah, blah, blah. Before this story, I think the assumption was that happened, he rescued her, and then he went to the hospital. Now they're getting a chance to tell us that, oh, no, he now looks like the Unknown Soldier, which if you've never read any of DC's Unknown Soldier books, you're missing out. They're really cool. It is a soldier whose face is wrapped up in bandages like a mummy, and he usually assumes the identity of someone else in the story to get the job done, and you never know who the soldier is. They've done versions of it over the years where it's more like CIA operative kind of stuff, and then traditionally back in the day it was just a war comic, and it was just this soldier who was so damaged and so screwed up, but he would go, and I believe it was the Unknown Soldier who killed Hitler in the DC comics. I think he stabs or shoots Hitler in the bunker. I think that was the last issue of Unknown Soldier, if I'm remembering that correctly. I think they told that story. It's really cool. But the Unknown Soldier is awesome. I'm a fan of that specific war. I've read a fair amount of war stuff. It's easy to lump it all in, but each one, like Haunted Tank is different than Unknown Soldier is different than The Losers is different, than Sergeant Rock. Sergeant Rock's pretty close to Sergeant Fury, but there's still some differences there. But Unknown Soldier, I really always dug. So that's what Snake Eyes looks like right now. His head is just tore up, and he's got some half-ass bandages written around his head. And they meet up with Stalker, who is in Mufti, which we've seen before, going back to earlier issues of G.I. Joe. Stalker's good with that, inserting and going undercover. And he's like, what happened to Snake Eyes' face? And he recognizes Snake Eyes from The Walk. Remember, Stalker served in Vietnam with Snake Eyes.
Yo, Joe!
And now we get a quick little recap in red to the modern day. So now the narrative is being taken over by Stalker. I can't. It's so interesting. This issue is actually interesting because I can't imagine them verbally sharing the story on the plane with Snake Eyes and Scarlet sitting right there, right? But it's in quotes. The story is being told in quotes, but there's no word balloons. So the beauty of what I'm reading this story is that this is all in their head, but they're all thinking the same story at the same time. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm not sure. Even when we get to the end, fast forward to the very, very last page, we'll circle back to this idea. I don't know that they're actually telling this story. I mean, they probably are. I'm probably overthinking this, but there's a part of me that wants to think they are all just thinking the exact same details at the same time. Not in like a X-Men psychic telepath way, but like in a mood way. Like they're all there thinking the same thing. And then when you get to the final page, which we'll get to, we'll wrap that thought up. So Stalker's filling in on the situation because it's like he takes over the narrative now because he's been introduced to the story. So he knows that Straw Hacker is being held at this certain building. He drives them through town. And they know this is the place. Hostage is on the 3rd floor. And it's Stalker's job to get him past the 2 bozos up front.
Yo, Joe!
Snake Eyes points out a couple dudes on the roof. And, they're trying to get in quietly, but, they've also all got guns on them. And it's not going to go well for these 2 dudes. Let's put it that way.
Yo, Joe!
Now, Scarlet takes over the narrative. And we get a brief flashback in red of Scarlet thinking about it. And again, there's no word balloon, but the the caption has quotes in it, and she says, "I must have been unconscious for an hour. I came to in the medevac, and there was Doc bending over me." And she wakes up and she's like, "What's going on? Where's Snake Eyes?" And Doc says he insisted that they go. And she's like, "But we were supposed to work as a team. I was a designated silent weapon specialist." And she says, "My knife, my throwing stars, where are they?" And she looks on her wrist, and Scarlet keeps them on her arm, on her forearm, So she looks on her wrist, and we see where there used to be some throwing stars. And this is a great piece of storytelling because you flip the page here. Yo, Joe! And it is just Snake Eyes in this turban-wearing, battle-damaged face just going ham with throwing stars and a trench knife right in these dudes' faces. So he murders 2 people. And you know what that means? That means we're adding 2 to the Snake Eyes kill count. This Snake Eyes gets a workout this issue on the kill count. So we're gonna hold on. Let me write this down. 1 and 2. That transition from page to page is fantastic. That's really cinematic, really well done. Rosado breaks the panel with the knife and the throwing star, makes it 3D and pop right at you. Vanishing point right behind Snake Eyes' face. I want an action figure of this version of Snake Eyes. I really do. That would be really cool. Give him the black head wrap with a bandaged face in the just straight green camo, or not even camo, just olive drab. That would be awesome. The only issue I have with the way this story is being told is we get Vipers that weren't around at the time. There shouldn't be Vipers like traditional Vipers. There's Televipers. I think that one is it might be an eel, or is that an alley Viper V2? They shouldn't. These all should be bandana faced cobras, right? This should be old school cobras. That's the only issue. That's the only thing that throws me on this is that like we're going retro, we're going old school. These guys should be old school cobras. That would have been the cherry on top of this wonderful cake that is this issue. Yo, Joe! Because the door opens and these Vipers are, they shoot Stalker. The one gets mowed down by Snake Eyes. That's another kill. Go for it, Snake Eyes. And then it's a firefight, and so it's on. So lots of people shooting from lots of angles. Yo, Joe! Grunt and Rock and Roll hit the guys on the roof. We don't have a Grunt and Rock and Roll kill count, but chalk one up for each of them. Stalker says he's got a hole clean through, so it's all literally all up to Snake Eyes because Grunt and Rock and Roll are busy with the other dudes and the things. So Snake Eyes is the only person that can go in the building and get Straw Hacker. He's got to do it entirely on his own, and this is the guy who just took jet fuel to the face. So there's 2 Vipers upstairs, and they look down and they see that they're cornered. And what are we gonna do? And there's one Viper who has an idea, and he's gonna strip down his skivvies and who knows what he's up to. Yo, Joe! I'm just kidding. It's actually a really cool bit. And we get one page here of Snake Eyes working his way through the building, dropping a grenade on some and he must kill. There's 3 more Vipers there. 4, if you count the one on the bottom. So we're gonna say 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Man, we are up to 1, 2, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. We're up to 63 on the Snake Eyes kill count, the verified kill count, guys. Unofficial. I may have missed 1 or 2 here or there. But we're up to 63 verified kills for Snake Eyes through the course of G.I. Joe. That's exciting. But again, this figure of Snake Eyes looks really cool. Has anyone done custom toys for this? Please tell me. Tell me if you have, because this is really cool. Yo, Joe! So now he's upstairs to that second floor room. And it's the Viper. There's 2 Vipers, and then there's Straw Hacker in the middle. And they all look like just normal, doughy white dudes. That's what they look like. And they're all saying, "I'm George Straw Hacker, the hostage." And the guy in the middle says, I am. These 2 are Cobras. And then the other guy says, "They're both lying. I'm the real hostage." So they're doing this is a great move, really smart move, to be honest, on the part of the Vipers. They're trying to throw off whoever was going to come through that door in order to take him by surprise. They both have pistols in their hands, but they didn't know what was going to come through that door. So now when they bust through, he doesn't shoot right away, and it's going to give them an opportunity to get at, in this case, Snake Eyes. So one of them, actually, it's funny, the Viper is the one who says the other two aren't really tied up. They both have guns. The Viper's saying that. And then Strawhacker, the real one, is saying they're Cobras. They're trying to throw the area into turmoil. And then the other Cobra says, no, I'm the real George Strawhacker. I'm the federal agent who was sent to investigate this scum. And the guy in the middle who's actually, and so it's great. It's a really cool moment. And this Clint Eastwood-esque showdown, his eyes narrow, Snake Eyes' eyes narrow, the blonde eyebrows, which would have been singed off. Let's be realistic. He wouldn't have any eyebrows, but it works. The picture's really cool and it works. But he probably wouldn't even have eyelids. But he narrows his eyes.
Yo, Joe!
And in a flurry, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. We are now up to 65. Snake Eyes kills those two Vipers. And he doesn't even hesitate. And he takes out the two Vipers. And then he and we also have his tanks downstairs too. So and those are eels, right? Those are Cobra eels. Yeah. No, maybe they're Vipers. No, I think they're regular Vipers. But there's his tanks down there. But they're getting away, and Snake Eyes rescues Strawhacker. And Strawhacker asks the mysterious man in the black turban, "How did you know which one to shoot?"
Yo, Joe!
So now we're in Hawk's head, or Hawk takes over the narrative, however you want to put it. And he says, that was some debriefing I had with George. That was some debriefing I had with George Strawhacker back in Washington. And Strawhacker is talking to Hawk, and he says, I've been answering your questions for 5 hours, Colonel Abernathy. Can you answer one of mine? He goes, who was the dude, the bandaged soldier who saved my life? And Hawk can't tell him. He says, the real identities are closely guarded secrets. And then there's a further flashback. So now we're in Inception flashback time. So now Hawk goes even deeper. That Hawk goes into a flashback. And he says, and he's remembering the day he picked up Snake Eyes at the airport when he came back from Vietnam. And he had to tell Snake Eyes that his family just died. And he had, that they died in the car wreck, which we know was with Cobra Commander's brother.
Yo, Joe!
And he says, how did I manage to spit out those inadequate words? How did I come to be the messenger of so much sorrow? And he says, is there anything I could do? Any letters need to be written to anyone else? And he said, Snake Eyes, now this is the introduction of something new. He says, Snake Eyes had 2 photographs in his pocket. One was the one with his sister with the bullet hole in it, and we know that's the one he kept on his head. But he also had a photo on his person of his sister with her fiance, George Strawhacker.
Yo, Joe!
And now we get to the last page, and this is just a great story. And now there's actual word balloons for the modern day. So we're out of flashback at all. So we're in the modern day, and it's interesting. The red light is gone now. So now it's either they're out of stress, like they're out of distress, they're safe, they're clear. They turn that night light off, and everything's normal colors. And Hawk is speaking out loud. He says, poor George. And so Stalker here says, thinking about Strawhacker too, sir. He never found out that it was his fiance's brother who had rescued him that time in the Middle East. And Hawk says, he never knew it was the same guy who got him out of the gulag in Barovia. But that's another story. So George Strawhacker, Snake Eyes was his guardian angel this whole time, and he never really understood why. And we have this nice shot of Snake Eyes and Scarlet flying off in the sunset together. So the whole narration was in their heads. Based on what Stalker says, thinking about Strawhacker too, sir. So they were all thinking the exact same story. And only when Hawk muttered out loud, poor George, did it bring Stalker out of his reverie. And now again, Snake Eyes looks like a serial killer in that mask. But anyway, it is what it is. It's the toy at the time. So Rosato did a great job with it. This is a lovely story. I really dig this story, man. I mean, it's lovely for all the terror and horror that's in it. It's really, really good. In Postbox from the Pit, we've got letters from Richard Fink, actually off of the USS Theodore Roosevelt, serving in the service. We also have Thomas Wheeler, which I think we had a Thomas Wheeler one last time. And we also have one from Dan Bryan Jr. out of Howard, Pennsylvania. And a Ross Netherton out of Concord, Massachusetts. So next month, more G.I. Joe fun. I really dug this. This is a great issue. This is really, really well done. I really enjoyed Rosato's pencils on it. The colors were great. And was it Christy Shield? Who did the colors again? Coloring is, Bob Sharon did a wonderful job on this. I really dig this issue. This is excellent. Fantastic, fantastic issue. I think it's probably not talked about enough how good this issue is, because the storytelling, there's a lot of levels to it. The passing of the mic of the narration just works at so many levels. The inception flashback within a flashback. Yeah, it's just the determination, the grit that they give to Snake Eyes, to illustrate his just his personality without him literally saying a word. It's awesome. This is great. It's a great issue. It's got to be top 10. It's just wonderful. And I love that it gives you more about his background without being part of the mystery. There's no more, we're not adding more ninjas to something. We're not, doubling down on Zartan being involved. And, it's just a straight up, this is a thing that happened. We just never told you this part. And here's the full story. And it's awesome. So really, really well done. Appreciate it. Appreciate you guys. Remember, hit me up. You on Joe. Send me an email, joeandjoepod@gmail.com. Because now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.